IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. Sometime back, the United Kingdom released its integrated review of its defense, security, development, and foreign policy. This document was 114 pages long and it made quite a splash. One reason was that, of course, that the UK had raised its earlier self-imposed cap of 225 nuclear warheads and brought it up to 260 warheads, which is an increase of 35 nuclear warheads. The other was that the UK clearly saw some kind of role for itself in the Indo-Pacific. But I think overall, this integrated review has caught our attention because of its rather optimistic note. For a Britain that's mired in all these Brexit wars, the integrated review is quite a remarkably self-assured document. Now, why are we talking about Britain today? We're talking about Britain because it still remains an important middling power. It's a member of the United Nations Security Council. It is a nuclear weapons power, as I just mentioned. And it does have a glorious naval tradition. And the other reason is, of course, that the UK in some respects functions in ways that are not all that alien to Indians. There are a lot of things about the way that the UK's government functions that actually would be quite understandable to Indians for reasons that are quite obvious, our shared colonial history. So to discuss the integrated review, I have with me today my fellow Aditya Pareek. And Aditya has actually read the entire document, and I'm hoping to ask him some interesting questions about what it says and why we should care about it. So firstly, welcome, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya. It's great to be back on the show.
Absolutely great to have you back. So let's just start with basics just to orient everybody. What is the integrated review and why do we have to care about it?
Well, it's a policy document which, according to the foreword by Her Majesty's Prime Minister, is a broad public policy framework that sets out Britain's vision for the security, development, and alliance goals across the world. So it's officially titled The Integrated Review of Security, Defense, Development, and Foreign Policy with the subtitle Global Britain in a Competitive Age. So I think the signaling with the way it has been titled is that the UK is trying to project itself as still a great power and not a declining power, which most foreign policy and geopolitical analysts rather call the UK. So I think the name itself has a lot of signaling in it. So I think this has implications ranging from raising and appropriating defense spending to setting up new international bureaucratic structures. And as you rightly mentioned, they've raised the nuclear stockpile, so doing strategic nuclear signaling, which, let me be honest, nobody expected until the review was just about to come out. So broadly, this is the document that would tell us what is Britain's plan to remain relevant in a world where its relative threats are proliferating and its relative finances are shrinking. If I were to give you a bit of recent history, there has been at least one review every decade since the 1950s. So the UK's current paradigm of reviews goes at least as far back as 2008, when there was a national security strategy document released. So the goal was to set priorities and review what assets were needed and what were superfluous, so that they could, restructure their spending and make better use of the resources that they had. So the document was updated in 2009, 2010, and then in 2015. So it was combined in 2015 with the strategic defense and security reviews. So three documents became one in 2015. And in late 2019, Her Majesty's government set out to reassess their national security and foreign policy needs and available resources within Britain's reach. So 2019 being when Boris Johnson came to power. So it was supposed to, this integrated review was supposed to come out in 2020, but it got delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was eventually released on the 16th of March 2021, which is this year. So Boris Johnson made the promise of a Brexit and an integrated review of national capabilities to project influence worldwide in the wake of his victory in the elections. So this was an important part of his election campaign.
All right. Now, another point of discussion that's come up with the integrated review is Boris Johnson's reliance on Dominic Cummings. Why is this been controversial, and what is Cummings' role in the integrated review process?
So I think Dominic Cummings was one of those people that really defined the way the UK would be remembered in the 21st century, to be quite honest. So it's noteworthy to remember that Dominic Cummings at the time was the chief advisor to Boris Johnson when he came to power. And as we know, he was a controversial figure. He is a controversial figure. He's just out of government. So he's seen as this efficiency over humanity kind of a person. If you're familiar with how the Brexit campaign, vote yes to leave the European Union in the UK went. So he's this kind of a person who'd rather invest in high-tech solutions, and he won't shrink from cutting personnel and conventional security and warfighting capabilities, like less tanks, more drones, more computer algorithms, and less commanders on the battlefield. That kind of a mindset is what he used to propagate. So the belief that he had and he'd propagated during his time as chief advisor to Boris Johnson was that to conventional platforms that we associate with projecting power or controlling territory would be long obsolete in the very near future. So until his exit from Boris Johnson's government from 10 Downing Street in November 2020, there was a lot of speculation on the review that it would bring a lot of cuts in personnel, in armored platforms, in fighter jets. As we know it, he was the chief campaign architect for the majority of the vote yes side of the Brexit referendum. And he demonstrated success on his side with his whole social engineering and targeted messaging thing. So he was of the opinion that information warfare and high-tech warfare would replace mass. So that amounts to you'd rather spend money on cheaper, more cutting edge platforms compared to what we conventionally associate with, as I just said, projecting power, controlling territory, or achieving our foreign policy goals through strategic messaging. So around the time Dominic Cummings went out in November 2020, at that time, Boris Johnson immediately released a figure, I think, around that time. He was talking about a $21.9 billion or a 16.5 billion pound rise in the defense budget of the UK. And he was trying to champion this as largest rise in the defense budget post Cold War. So Dominic Cummings definitely had huge influence on this review until November 2020. But after the pandemic hit, I think the scandal with him taking liberties in the lockdown in the UK had a lot of effect on his influence on this document as well as government in general. So I think he did have influence, and that never quite went out of the document. But there were other factors as well. So definitely, this is not the hellish review that everybody was worried about.
Right. Okay. So it's not something completely dominated by a Cummings vision. There's clearly been
Thankfully not.
There's clearly been a lot more consultation going on. All right, that's interesting. Now, one thing about this document is that it does seem to, like I had mentioned, confidence. It does seem to assume a lot of things will go right. It does seem to assume that Britain's relationship with the United States, for example, will remain strong. That its relations with its own NATO allies will remain on an even footing, and so on. There's also some fairly self-contradictory noises being made in the document about China. So it's not clear for me where exactly Britain stands on that issue. But I just want you to go over some of the key areas that the document does focus on. We've already talked about the nukes. Can you tell us some of the other areas that it delves upon?
Details that have managed to grab headlines in the public discourse. So, well, as we've already spoken about the UK's nuclear posture and the 40% increase in the nuclear stockpile. One more thing I think is worth mentioning about the nuclear stockpile is that until now, UK was publishing a number for operational warheads that they'd deployed on board the strategic submarines. But turns out this time it's been made clear that going forward, the British government is not going to disclose the number of operational warheads deployed. So that's something that people would watch out for. So the review also predicts that there might be a chemical, biological, nuclear terrorist or a nuclear terrorist attack by 2030. So this could be Islamist inspired, Northern Ireland related, or far left, far right, etc. related. So they are expecting terrorism to be a huge challenge going forward, and I think the integrated review in its opening pages even talks about hiring so many police personnel. So homeland security is also an issue that they've put on the forefront in this review. So UK, as we know it, has one of the strongest intelligence apparatus in the world, and the integrated review in its opening pages puts the expenditure on it to be around £3 billion each year. So that's really something that I didn't know before. And I mean, it's enlightening to know why the Five Eyes are as effective as they are. There's also this point about forward deployment for the UK's rejuvenated expeditionary and strike capability and the proliferation of surface combatants. So, if I recall correctly, they're not going to axe their landing platform docks, and they're going to maintain a expeditionary capability enforced by the two Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carriers, which can project power with the F-35 jets that they would field. So I remember during the presentation of this integrated review on the floor of the Parliament, the House of Commons, Boris Johnson was actually, he misspoke. He spoke of 24 frigates compared to the 15 we have now. Now, that's a factually incorrect statement since UK has 13 frigates and 6 destroyers. So, in all probability, he meant 24 escorts, that is, both destroyers and frigates capable of omni role combat capabilities around the aircraft carriers with their embarked F 35s. So, since the document released, the UK's integrated review, I must make it clear that the command paper has also come out. So it came out on the 22nd of March, and that has some more details, but not exactly everything. So I think the First Sea Lord also spoke about this very recently, about what they had gotten, what has been cut in the integrated review and command paper. So he did clarify that the Prime Minister meant 24 escorts. So that's destroyers as well as frigates. So, as I mentioned, traditional security and homeland security challenges are kind of getting a higher place than we would have previously expected from Her Majesty's government. So, this includes hiring about 20,000 extra police personnel to keep the peace for law enforcement. And for the alliance building thing that the forward of the document talks about, so there's a commitment to spend about 0.7% of gross national income on foreign aid and development. And this applies only when the pandemic hit, finances of the government normalize, and everything is hunky dory. At the moment, it's down to 0.5%. So they do definitely take foreign aid seriously and alliance building seriously. So I think some specifics in this pending, I think I should mention that. So there's also this provision to include the creation of a foreign Commonwealth and development office. So this means a merger of the UK's foreign office, which we know so well in India, with the development and Commonwealth offices. So a bunch of restructuring is definitely going on in the foreign policy apparatus of the UK. So the review also mentions a bit about the British government's focus on the climate change, biodiversity, and most definitely it's been influenced by the pandemic because it was being compiled during the pandemic. So there's this section dedicated to health resilience. But being a defense analysis guy, I am more concerned about the defense picture.
Sure. Yeah. And now I just want to get into how the rest of the world has looked at this document. What has been the reception, both in the press around the world and perhaps also from governments?
So the reception in the Western world actually has been largely positive, with a lot of buzz around the UK's nuclear warhead proliferation. And that's been something that a lot of people have commented on, and they just didn't expect it until it was, announced. So Russia was identified in several places throughout the document as a major active threat to the UK, and China as a systemic challenge. So that is quite interesting to me because, Russia being singled out this way is something that's alarming to anybody who's into the global security picture and understands what it means to demarcate somebody like that, to single a state like that. So it's really something that the UK should have avoided. They could have, I don't know, they could have said this in a more nuanced way, but to demarketing Russia as a active threat, I don't think the UK should have picked that fight, especially since it's out of the European Union. So Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has commented on the UK's nuclear weapons proliferation as being illegal and a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which the UK is a signatory and party to since the 1970s. So I remember even the Russian ambassador to the UK has said that the political relationship between Moscow and London is nearly dead. And I mean, he's not wrong. If the government of the UK is directly calling Russia an active threat, I mean, that's very much expected. Although I'm yet to come across a comment by China or any of its functionaries on the UK's integrated review, so I'm not exactly sure what the Chinese view on the document is. So before the command paper was presented, Ben Wallace, the defense secretary of the United Kingdom, he went on BBC and he basically attributed the proliferation of nuclear warheads to Russia's anti-ballistic missile capabilities, the interception of anti-ballistic missiles. So the UK sees this as maintaining credible nuclear deterrence. They're going to need an increased number of nuclear warheads. So I'm not sure exactly why this is happening, but that's really a worrying trend for me.
Okay. Now, the one other thing that's striking to me is that uh, this rather ambitious review comes at a time when the UK is also making a lot of cuts, and this is also, of course, hinted at within the review itself. Can you very quickly, Aditya, just go over some of the big cuts that we're going to see in the United Kingdom's military?
So the integrated review really is a document that is trying to project a picture which is very, very agreeable to the British public and the British government. So they don't want to say that our place in the world is shrinking, but it is shrinking. So it doesn't really explicitly say that this will be cut or that would be cut. They just project the numbers that are going to be there in 10 years or 15 years or 30 years. So it somewhat became clear with the Command Defense White Paper that came out on the 22nd, a week later. So I can remember that Ben Wallace clearly said that they would at least have 48 F-35s on board UK's carriers. They would purchase at least 48 F-35s, and they wouldn't stop there. He didn't give a very specific number, but he said that we would keep buying until we're satisfied that our power projection capabilities are being met. That this is what we hope for. The British Army, is going to see cuts on personnel and platforms. Both notable to go will be the Challengers, the old Challenger tanks, and about 4,000 personnel. but they're getting restructured to the British Army. So there would be a new Ranger regiment. With this move, I think the UK will have one of the highest number of special forces compared to regular troops. So that's a significant development. The RAF, the Royal Air Force, is losing major airlift assets in the form of C-130 Hercules. There was even a joke that, hey, since we're talking so much about our digital forces, our cyber capabilities, might as well just email the forces across abroad on our stated deployments. So, yeah,
Right.
the Royal Navy was the winner in this, well, relatively. They're going to have a survey vessel, a multi-role ocean surveillance ship. So, for somebody who's a hydrography enthusiast, that's news to me. They're going to have autonomous mine countermeasure systems to replace the minesweepers that would be progressively put out of service. At this point, I'm also pretty certain the Indian Navy is also going to emulate this. We also advocated along the same line in one of our op-eds that you and I wrote recently about hydrography, that they should make hybrid vessels and base minesweeping duties with the UUVs that these vessels can accommodate. So our article in the Asia Times, would link it in the description. The Type 45 air defense destroyer will see the replacement in the late 2030s with Type 83. This would be a new class of ship. So this is kind of disheartening for me because my favorite ship in the Royal Navy is HMS Dragon. And its motto, "We yield but to St. George." So that's a Type 45 ship. Here's to hoping we'll see the red Welsh dragon on the bow of a similarly named future ship of type 83.
Yeah.
Well, let me just mention one more thing. To me personally, I think the focus on risk analysis is something that the UK emphasizes a lot. And they emphasize on defining and reducing the risk in all spheres of life in the UK. And they've this acronym ALARP, ALARP, as low as reasonably possible. And it's something admirable in the UK's policy circles. The way they present sub legislations have meaningful policy debates and frameworks like this integrated review to more or less capture the way their policy frameworks and the policy sphere operates. So I love that they do all of this in the UK's parliament, and I really wish that India could adopt some parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said at the very beginning of this episode, there are things about the way the UK goes about its processes and the way India does, but there are also things that I think we could perhaps emulate and actually still learn from the British. Thank you so much, Aditya, for both such a thoughtful and such a detailed look at the integrated review of the United Kingdom. We'll definitely want to track where this goes in the coming months and years, because it's going to have a lot of downstream implications for the Indo-Pacific as well. So thank you once again very much.
Thank you, Aditya. It's a pleasure.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cedar Tires and thewholetruthfoods.com. Thank you for your support. We did a bunch of cock and bulls this week. We had guests like Ayushi Amin and Puneet Mania for that. Besides that, Vasanti Hariprakash was on, as well as Jay Alani, a paranormal investigator. Really, really great week on Cyrus Says. Do check it out. Tune into This Round Is On Me for an episode recorded from Gulmarg featuring one of India's professional alpine skiers, Arif Khan, who's looking forward to representing India at the Beijing Olympics. On The Habit Coach, Ashton has a chat with Kunal Rajput, a popular fitness trainer who recently completed 7 rounds of his Unlocked workout series. The reunified, simplified gang of Tony, Naren, Chuck, and Shrikant discussed NFTs on the latest episode. On The Millennial Athlete, Tanvi and Shlok looked back at all the England championships of the year so far and discussed the interesting highlights of the same. Also on Thale Harate, our Kannada podcast, Ganesh spoke to Archana Shyam of Antharanga Theatre in the latest episode. And on Kadai podcast, our Tamil show, Kavita Jiva shed light in another story about the bravery and excellence in the governance of the Pallava dynasty. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.